So like Scott was just showing, I went to the FEMS website, I grabbed that URL and I copied it into a overview worksheet. And I'm doing this for 4 fire danger rating areas. They each have between 2 and 4 raw stations that they pull from. And so you go in and you create your queries to pull the URL. And I'll just open this one as an example. You can't see that second screen, can you? Let's pull that over here. You should be able to see that screen now, I think. The Power Query editor. Someone just give me a yes.
Yep, we got it.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So you go to the advanced editor, and if you've already done this, you're probably familiar with this, but instead of the URL, you can actually have it just reference a named cell. So instead of that big URL, this reference to the named cell, it pulls straight from my overview worksheet. And this is great. Like Travis was talking about here, you can just go right into this cell and you can modify the date. You can use the concatenate function if you want in order to build these kind of more dynamically. And just by going to this define name, you can name the cell and then the query knows to reference that exact cell. So what I did is I pulled in the fire danger queries, one query for each of my FDRAs, and then one query for each of the weather. So as an example, here's my let me get to this. So let's go to my high elevations. So you see the high elevation FDRA is pulling in information from 4 different raw stations. In this example, they're all weighted equally, but it's really easy to add a weight column, have that weight column reference a lookup table, and then you can calculate weighted as well. And you can see I added the forecast and observation. This pulls that pulls into my stats graph later on. But what I did, mostly just for my own, helping it make sense in my own head, is once I have this information, and this is the year to date. I did the same thing Travis did. 1/1/25 through December 31st, and it'll automatically pull in the forecast for the next 7 days. And so what I did, again, just to kind of keep this straight in my head, I copied that exact same data structure, but I took the average. So now you see for that high elevation FDRA, I just have one line for each day, the daily max. And so then what I did here, and going back to the original question from Allison, I believe, what I did is I populated, let's see where I'm at here. What I did is I took all this information here that you're seeing in this Excel sheet. I have 4 different FDRAs, and I populated a 5-day, 7-day summary for each of my FDRAs. And this updates automatically. You open the Excel file, you hit the update, everything updates automatically. It doesn't take any work, right? So we have my high elevation FDRA, the Montrose FDRA, Uncompahgre, and the West Zone. And so I just did this all yesterday, so the graphs need a little bit of kind of cleanup still, rough. And this is for me. I haven't handed this off to the dispatch yet, but we'll take a look at this as an example. what we're showing here on the stats graph, like you all are used to. We see the mean, the max. I wanted to line at the 90th condition, and then we have our observation and the forecast. So the first four columns here, these are all pulling out of the complementary fire family plus analysis that was undertaken, and then these fifth and sixth columns of 25 observations and 25 forecast. This pulls straight from that FEMS feed, the first FEMS feed pulling the four stations, and then I aggregated that and simplified that so it's one Excel worksheet for each of my SIGs, each of my FDRAs, and then using a little kind of switch, count F's and F's and O's. I just pulled in the forecast data and the observations. So you can see here in column G and F, I have my year-to-date observations through through whatever date it is today. Looks like it's the 7th, and then it here on the 5th, I guess I didn't update this morning, but it switches from observations to forecast. And so the next couple of days are forecast. And then you just highlight all that stuff. You just kind of drag and drop that square. You go to Excel, hit the recommended graphs, line, well, you choose the line graph, and then you can kind of modify your chart as needed, and just kind of pointing out a few things. The Fire Family Plus analysis that I based this on actually had a seasonal filter of March 1st, so that's why there's no values in the mean and max for the first few months. And then obviously you see how my forecast line here just drops to 0. That's a graph formatting issue, having it worked through. And as I kind of scroll through, you can see how I just repeated the process for each of the 4 FDRAs. So definitely have more queries than I yeah, I could probably simplify this if I was a better coder, but it works pretty it works pretty smoothly. So hopefully that was helpful, Scott and everyone. And if anyone does have questions or wants to uh, want to take a deep dive, I'm happy to spend some time uh, helping you understand kind of what I did. I'm sure there's better ways to do this. In fact, I know there's better ways to do this, but this seemed kind of workable for me since I was fairly new to FDOPS, fire planning, and FEMS as of May of last year, of May of a few months ago.
That's great, Michael. I appreciate it that you willing to share and go through all this because it helps out show everybody the availability and what you can do with all the data and how you can get all the information pretty well refreshed without having to log in and do having to do Fire Family Plus all the time to get these charts.
Yeah,
It's a huge benefit. So
you just hit the refresh button here, and then the cool thing is if I were to move to another dispatch area, all I have to do is update these raw station IDs, and um, it would run from there. Obviously, we need the crosswalk and lookup tables for the staffing level and response level, and where the breakpoints are. That comes from the Fire Family Plus, but at least the data management side of this, if you're using those URLs effectively, it really takes a lot of the labor out of this.
yeah, it's great. Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing.
Hey, Michael, before you get, I was actually interested in you. That's awesome. That's cool that you came to the same conclusion on the year to date and tricking the system. I saw you had hot, dry, windy on there. What was the legend that was next to that? I'll just go back to that total
Yeah,
sidebar for just a second.
yeah, sure. And again, like I said, I'm just like stepping into the fire planner role. This is all new to me. So yeah, what this is this is just a placeholder for me right now in the current version of the calculator that Montrose Dispatch uses on a daily basis. It uses the same URL concept that we're talking about here with FEMS
Mm-hmm.
with the hot, dry, windy index. So again, when you hit the refresh all button, it updates those 10 FEMS queries. It also updates that one query from the hot, dry, windy index. And then they have a little kind of Smokey Bear style kind of cheat sheet that just highlights the
Yeah, that's the thing I was
highlights
interested
the
in.
big talking
Is
points.
what's filled in there with that?
Well, this is just a summary of the ERC percentile, the BI percentile, staffing level, response level, and recommended restrictions.
Okay. Is that an
Yeah.
image or is that actually being
Well,
populated?
this this is an image on the Excel spread, but again, I just rebuilt everything I just walked you through. I rebuilt yesterday, so
Mhm.
this is just a placeholder for me because I need to rebuild this little image as well. I just haven't gotten here yet.
Okay. Thanks.
But since we have all of this data that you're seeing in this brown chart is in this table,
Mm-hmm.
so it's just a matter of reformatting it and kind of making it look a little different.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of different products that are out there available that people have been making over the past 6+ months. So if you're not sure, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm sure I can find someone who's probably has a product similar to what you're looking for, so you don't have to go through the process yourself if you don't want to. So, but I also do recommend doing it because it's a good learning experience, and I like Excel, so sometimes. All right, other questions? Or I guess discussion forums, anything like that. This is a good session on for all of this. So, all right. I am going to bring up, we redid the portal a couple of, well, about last week. It did get updated. And I also wanted to show a new image to kind of walk through some of the questions that have come up. Are the ingest timing. And so wanted to show this is now going to be, this is posted on the FEMS portal for everybody. So let me do a share. All right, so timing ingest, there's been a couple of questions, about when everything comes in, how often it gets calculated, and all that information. So this is a real quick, just visual for everybody. That's saying at any one point in time, this is how we calculate information. So DRI snow flags, those come in once daily. Again, obviously snow flags are only a once daily ingest process. They are either on or off, and they are on for a 24-hour period. Those come in at 1600 UTC, and that's when we get the current snow flag for the current day and then the 7-day forecast. We get our weather observations. We get the weather information comes in every 5 minutes. And that is from WXX. So those are updated as on a need or every 5-minute basis. We also, every time we get in a new weather, we do run the NFDR calculations for those stations that were brought in. Then that translates into the once daily min max that occurs at 0400 UTC. And that also produces the NFDR forecast for that time frame. I'm sorry, the forecast for the once daily comes in at 0400. And then the daily min max value, we calculate that for the previous day at midnight for the previous time frame. So that's what gives us the daily min max values occurs for that observation time for the previous day at midnight. We also get the observation forecast, or the NOAA forecast comes in at 0400. We are only getting those at this time once daily. So that's also where some of the time frame and timing issues are starting, people, a new train of thought. Instead of getting that forecasted information at 13 or 1400 in the middle of your shift, we now get it when you get your latest forecast will be available when you show up first thing in the morning, and that will be the most current forecast at that time. So you're coming in from your operational shift, and you will see the most up-to-date forecast at that time. So a little bit different of process and kind of a mind or thinking as you go forward with your daily values. So yeah, John.
So is that a typo on your slide? Because if for the daily min max average plus current forecast once daily, it says UTC. Isn't that 0 local?
Right here. Sorry. On
I
the
can't.
and if the once daily. I wish I had my pointer.
Yeah, your bottom bar. Yeah, I don't see your.
Yeah, I understand. I know. The 0400, the NFDRS forecast once daily. So that does, because that runs at 0400 because that's when we get the forecast in.
Right. But the bar below that, where you've
Yes.
got, so you list once daily at midnight UTC.
That is for the daily min max for the observation.
Right, but isn't that at midnight local for the station? At least that's what I've been observing.
Oh, yes, I apologize. That is midnight
Okay.
local. You are correct. I will make sure that gets adjusted. You are correct. The 000 UTC for previous day.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it should be local station.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Had a momentary, it's like, what have I missed?
Nope. Perfect. No, I
Okay,
appreciate you
thanks.
catching that. I will make sure I get that changed. So again, this is posted on the portal. So when you go into the web portal, let me go back here under the user guide and getting started. You'll see the data ingest timing on here of that chart, just in case you want to have a refresh of that information. Again, we do have a lot of other information on here. So the user guides, this would be if you want to get into data connections. This has been a lot of what we talked about today. How to use that copy data link, how to apply that in Excel, how to do the get data manipulation tech tip. And that's a lot of what Michael had been working through and Travis about actually manipulating and tricking or adjusting the URL to get the information that you want. So these 3 links would really provide a lot of information about what we've talked about today. There's also the API. If you're interested in getting into the additional API information and features, the user guide is on here as well, available. If you need API access, please just shoot me a message. I can get you API access. There is no restrictions of who can have API access. We are just, the only reason why we have it as a request is because we want to be able to, if we need to message to that user group that like we're changing something in the API or anything like that, we want to be able to communicate with them, with that group directly, and we can do that if we manage that group through FEMS. So that's really the only reason why we have it as a login only, or you need the access to it. Let's see here. So, and then field temp module, again, there's a bunch of the user guides in here as well, how to manage groups, and being different types of roles that are available through here. The general information, again, this is really good information, just additional reference material and notices, more about FEMS as a whole. And then I know we talked about this last week, but we migrated most of the NFDRS transition materials that was on the NFDRS subcommittee, fire danger subcommittee website that has been transferred over to this site. But there is also information linked in here for FEMS specific about the RAWS QC data gap process, the FW21 file format, as well. So there's kind of a mixture of information in here, as well as the links to Fire Family Plus and such as well. So a lot of information now available through here. I would, if you don't have this site bookmarked, I would start utilizing this. And we also do have all the transition materials. We're going to work on getting this adjusted if you want to just look at really kind of more the information, user guides, particular to how to get moving and going forward with FEMS. This would be at least a very basic one to understand. This also has the Fire Family Plus database if you don't have that available. And this again has that all the data that you would need for getting going into Fire Family Plus utilizing FEMS information. So that's all I have for today. I know it's just at the top of the hour here, so I'll stick on for a minute or two if anybody has any questions. If not, we will chat next week. Everybody have a good day.
Thank you.